Imagine a world where no one is forced to obey, where there are no authoritarian governments or explicit censorship, where people live surrounded by comfort, entertainment, and constant pleasures. But at the same time, no one is truly free. People don't question anything. They do not rebel. They do not feel the need to change the system because they believe they are already living in the best of possible worlds. This may seem like a futuristic scenario, but it was exactly the kind of dystopia provided by Aldous Huxley in the admirable New World. While most people fear a future similar to that described by George Orwell in 1984, where brutal governments impose fear as a control tool, Huxley warned us for something even more subtle, and perhaps much more dangerous: pleasure as a tool of domination. In 1961, in a prophetic discourse, he explained that true social control would not come from strength, but of mass distraction. And today, more than 60 years later, his prophecy seems to have come true. We live in an era where entertainment has never been so accessible. Social networks feed us with an endless flow of addictive content. Short video applications train us to look for instant bonus. Games, pornography, fast food, and cool drugs are marketed as harmless forms of pleasure. And the more we give ourselves to these stimuli, the less we question our own reality. What is happening here? Is it, just like in the book of Huxley, are we being conditioned to accept our good servitude? Has modern distractions become unable to perceive the loss of our own freedom? In this video, we will explore how pleasure can be used as a control tool and what we can do to recover our mental autonomy. You will understand what differentiates Orwell's Huxley dystopia and why it is more dangerous, how behavior psychology trains us to obey without realizing it, why do we seek pleasure at all costs, and how it enslaves us, and how all this is already happening around us. If you believe it is free, it may be because you have never stopped to question the invisible currents that hold you. When we think of a world without freedom, the first image that comes to mind is a totalitarian regime, full of vigilance, censorship, and brutality. This is the popular view of a dystopia, reinforced by works such as 1984 by George Orwell. In the book, the government controls everything through fear. People live under constant vigilance. Any dissident thinking is considered a crime, and the truth can be modified according to the will of the party. Many believe this is the greatest threat to our freedom, but according to Aldous Huxley, the real danger has never been oppression of fear, but slavery for pleasure. He believed that instead of forcing us to obey, the system would keep us distracted and satisfied all the time, so that we never wanted to question anything. While Orwell imagined a world where love would destroy us, Huxley predicted a world where we would destroy our own submission. Sociologist Neil Postman summed up this difference brilliantly. Orwell feared those who would forbade us to read books. Huxley feared there was no need to ban anything because no one would be interested in reading. And this idea leads us to a fundamental question. If we live in a world where we are constantly distracted by entertainment and instant pleasures, are we really free? Think about how much the modern world looks like an admirable new world. In the book, citizens are conditioned to seek pleasure all the time, through drugs, sex, and fun without purpose. In our world, we have the modern equivalent of this on addictive social networks, accessible porn, ultra-processed fast food, and unbridled consumption of surface content. The frightening is that while in 1984 the government uses censorship to prevent the truth from being disclosed, in our reality, excessive information and distractions ends up playing the same role. The problem is not that people do not have access to knowledge. The problem is that no one else has patience or interest to pick it up. We are living exactly what Huxley feared, a world where the truth need not be hidden because it simply becomes irrelevant. And this process is not coincidence. It happens because our mind can be conditioned to seek pleasure at any cost, something that Huxley understood deeply. And it's about this psychological conditioning that we'll talk about now. The idea that a government can control the population without using force may seem absurd at first glance. But in the 20th century, a psychologist named Skinner proved that this was not only possible, but highly efficient. Skinner was one of the main scholars of operant conditioning, a concept of behavioral psychology that explains how our habits and behaviors can be shaped without realizing it. In his experiments, Skinner trained rats to press a lever in exchange for food. Each time the animal performed the desired action, he received a reward. The result? Rats quickly learn to repeat behavior as the brain associates pleasure with repetition. Now imagine this same principle being applied not to laboratory rats, but to billions of human beings every day. Today, large corporations and governments use exactly this type of conditioning to shape our behavior. The way you use social networks, how to consume entertainment, and even how it relates to others is guided by stimuli carefully designed to keep you stuck in dopamine cycles. For example, social networks use notifications, likes, and comments to reinforce addictive behaviors and keep you rolling the screen for hours. Delivery applications reward you with frequent promotions and notifications to keep you consuming without thinking. Streaming platforms release new episodes strategically to make sure you keep watching non-stop. The mechanism is always the same: immediate pleasure in exchange for your attention and time. But Skinner discovered something even scarier. When he altered experiments to reward mice in an unpredictably vicious behavior became even more intense. The rats did not know when they would receive the reward, so they compulsively pulling the lever, hoping to get food. This is the same principle that keeps people addicted to gambling and social networks. When you take your phone and open Instagram, you don't know if there will be a new like, a message, or an interesting video. This uncertainty activates a system in your brain called variable reward, which makes behavior addictive. You repeat the habit not because you want, but because your brain was trained for it. And this is how we become prisoners of pleasure. Huxley understood this decades before modern technology existed. He predicted that in the future, people would be trained to love their own servitude, because their minds would be shaped to seek pleasure above all. And this leads us to the most important question: how can pleasure be used as a social control tool? If you wanted to control an entire society without people realizing, what would you do? The obvious answer would be to impose censorship, restrict freedoms, and use brute force to suppress any form of rebellion. But Huxley predicted that true social control would not come from oppression, but from distraction. In Admirable World Novo, the population need not be watched all the time because it is numb by constant pleasures. The central piece of this control is the sum, a drug distributed by the government that offers an instant escape of reality. Whenever citizens feel sad, frustrated, or dissatisfied, they take a dose of sum and immediately return to the state of compliance. Sum acts as a psychological anesthetic. It prevents people from thinking critically about their own lives and the society in which they live. Now take a break and think. Does it remind you something? We live surrounded by a multitude of modern forms of sum, social networks, which provide us with an infinite distraction. Pornography, which keeps us stuck to primitive impulses. Fast food and sugar, which offer us immediate pleasure without effort. Empty entertainment, which keeps us busy without ever challenging us. And even antidepressants and anxiolytics, which, although necessary for many, are often used exaggerated to suppress symptoms without treating the causes. The point here is not to demonize pleasure, but to understand how it can be used to keep us passive and conformed. The scary is that, unlike the violent repression of 1984, this form of control does not generate resistance. People do not fight against their own currents because they do not even realize they are stuck. Proof of this is what we call dopamine culture. Today, every aspect of the modern world is designed to stimulate our mechanisms of pleasure in the most intense and addictive way as possible. TikTok and Instagram reduce our ability to concentrate with short and highly stimulating videos. Games and social networks activate the same casino reward system, making us dependent. Excessive consumption of entertainment prevents us from reflecting on our own lives. And the more we seek instant pleasure, the less we are able to tolerate the discomfort of reality. Philosopher Byung-Chul warns that when a society becomes addicted to immediate pleasure, he loses the ability to think critically, to question power, and to seek something beyond momentary gratification. That is, the more distracted we are, the more easily we are manipulated. Huxley understood this before everyone. He predicted that in the future, entertainment would become a political weapon. And the big question is, are we living this future now? Huxley predicted that in the future, people would not need to be forced to obey. They would accept their submission because they would be too distracted to care. And if we look at today's world, it is impossible not to perceive the parallels with the admirable new world. 1. Addiction on social networks. Studies show that the average smartphone user checks your device more than 150 times a day. This does not happen by chance. Social networks are designed to be addictive, using the principles of Skinner's operating conditioning. Each like, comment, or notification activates a system in the brain called the dopaminergic reward. This creates a cycle of dependence that makes us repeatedly return to social networks without even realizing it. The result? Less time for reflection, less patience for long readings, and less critical questioning. That is, the longer we spend consuming distractions, the less we can think independently. 2. The consumption of easy pleasures. In addition to social networks, other forms of immediate pleasure have become predominant. Accessible and free pornography has been associated with alarming levels of addiction, dysfunctions, and changes in human behavior. Fast food and excessive consumption of sugar create a drug addiction similar to drugs, affecting mood and disposition. Excessive, passive entertainment, such as endless series marathon, keeps people constantly distracted. In the end, these distractions are not just harmless. They are shaping our way of living. We are becoming a society increasingly addicted to superficial pleasures and less willing to face discomfort. And this crop of instant gratification has a deep effect in the way we deal with life. 3. Passivity as a norm. When was the last time you stopped to reflect on something deeply? Our attention time is decreasing, our patience is running out, and our ability to resist discomfort is disappearing. This means that we are increasingly willing to accept anything that keeps us comfortable. In the past, people struggled for change. They protested, questioned, resisted. Today, most people prefer to ignore the world's problems as long as they have a bright screen to distract themselves. And this is the scariest point of Huxley's forecast. Modern slavery does not need chains. It does not need visible oppressors. It hides in an infinite feed of notifications, in an incessant flow of short videos, in a society that teaches us how to choose immediate comfort rather than real freedom. What leads us to the final question: is there any way to escape this cycle? If you have arrived here, you may be wondering, so are we all condemned? The answer is no, but only if we become aware of the problem. The greatest danger of modern society is not repression, but distraction. We live surrounded by immediate pleasures, and the more we surrender to them, the less we can see what really matters. The truth is that the system no longer needs to force us anything. It only offers us constant doses of entertainment, instant gratification and distractions, and we voluntarily accept. And if we are not careful, our days will become an infinite cycle of empty stimuli, leaving behind everything that could really bring us meaning and purpose. The question that Huxley asked us, and now we should do ourselves, is, are you in control of your life or just following the flow? Do you decide how to use your time, or your time is being stolen without noticing? Do you choose your pleasures or are being conditioned to consume them without thinking? Do you still have the patience to reflect, learn, question, or are you stuck in the infinite search for quick stimuli? If the answer to these questions makes you uncomfortable, it may be a sign that something needs to change. What can we do? The solution is not to reject pleasure, but resume control over it. Reflect before you consume. Whenever you open social networks or watch something, ask yourself, is this adding something to me, or I'm just running away from boredom? Learn how to deal with discomfort. Personal growth does not happen in constant pleasure, but in the ability to face challenges. Create moments of silence. Book a time from your day without distractions, without screens, just to think. Read more and consume quality content. Train your mind to support deeper thoughts without depending on quick stimuli. What Huxley warned us is that voluntary servitude is the most dangerous form of slavery, and the only way to resist it is to become aware of it and act. After all, what's the point of living surrounded by pleasures if we are not really free? Now, I want to know about you. Do you believe we live in this era of distraction and control? What do you do to maintain your mental freedom? Comment down here, because I want to know your opinion. If this video made sense to you, don't forget to like and share. And if you want more reflections like this, subscribe to the channel. We see each other in the next video.